A very good evening to all of you and season's greetings from Sri Lanka from Apit family. We are back again with our New Year resolutions, of course, with our new passion and new alignments for the common talk that we have been having with specialists, meeting a CEO forum and meeting a CEO webinar series. So we do have a special guest today as well, as always. And to start with the today's sessions, I would like to invite our chairman to share his expressions and thoughts with us for the day. Chairman, over to you.
Thank you, Kaushali. Today we have a very special guest with us. Actually, I know his schedule in spite of his busy schedule. So he has accepted our invitation to be our guest today. So Apit very warmly welcome on behalf of our CEO Roshane Godeke and Board of Management, student population and our staff. So very warmly welcome you here, Mr. Nawaz Rajabdeen. Thank you very much for your time that you are dedicated for our students. So objective of this CEOs forum is to get the direct interaction with people like you, opinion leaders, and the CEOs, for them to have a direct interaction. So as you are also aware, APIT known as for a quality education. So we want to build leaders within. So we are asking all our students population, not only for your academic excellence, we need to, when you are pass out, you have to have the right leadership qualities within. So particularly when you really look at, you are not a stranger to us, Mr. Rajabdeen. In fact, so it's such a coincidence, myself, Dr. Rohanta, and yourself, we are sitting in many boards together. So we know each other's the competencies. I'm sure our students will have a massive opportunity to especially grab on your expertise, specializing SME development in this country, the contribution that you made in many capacities to develop in Sri Lanka, SMEs to become exporters and to the next level. So that is the need of the hour to get the foreign currency into Sri Lanka, that you have been immensely contributed that part. So I'm not going to talk about your profile. I'm sure Rohanta will introduce you in the right way. But once again, I would like to say from APIT side, thank you very much for your participation. Please give your maximum output to our students. And also I will request all our student population get the maximum out of Mr. Rajabdeen through his massive career experience for your life. Thank you, Nawaz, for your presence. Thank you.
Very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Let me take the honor of introducing our good friend Nawaz Rajabdeen, Country Director for Sri Lanka at the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, or UNIDO, and Ambassador to the World Union of Small and Medium Enterprises. Nawaz is a legend in Sri Lanka's industrial chamber and small and medium scale sector. He's been a pillar in the economic development landscape of Sri Lanka. And it's not just a fallacy in when I say this. If you look at his profile, he's the former chairman of Rajabdeen and Sons, Hilton Colombo Developers, and been the president of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Sri Lanka, Vice President Chamber of Ceylon, National Chamber of Industries, Vice President World Association of Small Medium Enterprises. And it just tells us that Mr. Rajabdeen has shouldered some key positions for the economic development agenda of the country, which actually the SME accounts for almost 73% of the economy. Now, Nawaz has also served the government of Sri Lanka in many successive governments. It's not just one political party, but successive governments. He's been the chairman of the Industrial Development Board, IDB, the director of the Sri Lanka Export Development Board, Sri Lanka Conventions Bureau, Sri Lanka Insurance Board, and the advisor to the Board of Investment in his distinguished career. Currently, Nawaz is the country director Sri Lanka, United Nations, or UNIDO as you call it, and also the ambassador to the World Small and Medium Enterprises. So Nawaz, you're not a stranger to Sri Lanka, but as we speak today, there are people listening to you from China, from UK, from Singapore, From some are from sitting in the US, because they have been speakers on this particular platform. So whenever there is a guest speaker, they all tune in from all the high commissions around the world, including Beirut and Lebanon. So you're having a global audience apart from our own MBA students from the Asia Pacific Institute of Information Technology. So Nawaz, over to you, sir, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Dr. Rohantha. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Atukorala, for your kind introduction. And I remember Atukorala and I was involved in doing the Northern Industrial Estate in the year 2014. We played an active role there. So even Dr. Atukorala also had so much of involvement in this SME sector. Thank you for the opportunity granted to me to this forum on this important and current topic of post-COVID-19 industrial development in Sri Lanka, focusing on women entrepreneurs. And I wish to briefly share some of the perspective which will give some insight to you on the post-pandemic industrial revival strategy of the country. As you all know, the COVID-19 pandemic resulted in the worst global economic crisis after the Second World War. Economists estimate that the global economic drop caused by the pandemic is around 4.5% of the global GDP, which amounts to almost $3.94 trillion in lost economic output. In the Sri Lankan context, the country's economy was contracted by 3.6% in 2020, making it the worst growth performance on record. In terms of the key economic sector, the impact on the agricultural sector has been minimal, as the sector is quite resilient to the external shocks. Most of the impact was felt in services and industry sector, as these sectors are more open to external shocks. Let me briefly touch on the key industry sector just for you to understand the nature of the damage. Agricultural export experienced a decline in demand. This includes fisheries, which is exported as processed food under the industrial sector. Tea prices were affected due to economic instabilities of the main exporting market from the pandemic. The textile and apparel sector's heavy dependence on the overseas market had an augmented impact on the sector. Agrochemicals experienced a supply chain disruption as the main agrochemical markets such as US and Japan were adversely affected. The construction sector impact was medium to high due to fiscal constraints. Large-scale public sector construction activities have been suspended temporarily to facilitate funding to other sectors, whereas other multilateral projects were delayed or prolonged. Real estate was affected with the delay in the project execution, creating a negative impact on the real estate developers. Moreover, with the overall slowdown in the economy, this sector experienced a decline in new sales, in addition to the stretched cash collection from the pre-sale stock. Tourism industry faced a major blow due to social distancing requirements, travel disruption, restriction, and quarantine requirement. Transport sector performance has a strong connection with the manufacturing and tourism industry. The knock-on effect of both these subsectors was strongly transmitted to the transport sector. Wholesale and retail trade faced a significant challenge as it relies heavily on imports, given the supply disruption worsening the exchange rate, import restriction, and decline real income. However, food retail segment was better positioned because of its business mix, including drugstores and convenience stores. Automotive sector was also highly exposed because of their reliance on international supply chain. The crisis worsened an already dwindling demand for vehicles. Banking and finance services sector faced quite a big challenge as the pandemic situation posed a substantial risk for the overall loan growth and the asset quality of banks. You can see from the industries that I mentioned what is the large-scale impact the pandemic has had. Speaking of revival and intervention, the government quickly responded with a unique policy solution to address this crisis. They introduced several measures to ease the burden on the public with emphasis on low-income households. The central bank also announced the additional liquidity measures and downward installment to policy interest rates. The government issued a debt moratorium for SMEs in identified vulnerable sectors such as tourism and construction. Debt moratorium to the self-employed, relief on personal loans and credit card payment, and reduce the prices of some essentials goods. To name a few, the government also requested debt relief from private banks and financial institutions in the form of suspending debt repayment for a time period from its lenders in an effort to gain great flexibility to address the crisis. These measures helped creating some breathing space by easing up an element of financial constraint for firms and workers, and crucially injecting measure of liquidity into the economy. With the intention of financing the grassroots revival of the industrial sector, Central Bank offered multi-million rupee relief fund through the banking network in the country, which were used to provide working capital support to thousands of MSMEs throughout the country. Some salient features of the post-pandemic industrial revival program include working capital offered at concessionary annual interest rate at 4 to 6% for a period up to 2 years. Banks were encouraged to enable working capital support from their internally generated funds for SME that were captured under the central bank Saubhagya scheme. Debt moratorium was extended to over hundreds of thousands of individuals and enterprises. Special financing schemes were introduced to support the tourism sector with the intervention of the Lanka Tourism Development Authority. Let us now focus on the post-COVID industrial development of women entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka. This is the subject matter we should discuss. Women in Sri Lanka overall play a vital role in contributing to the economy by various industries such as tea plantation, rubber industries, handicrafts, apparel sector, foreign employment, to name a few. For context of the total population of Sri Lanka, women account for more than 52%, as per World Bank statistics published in 2015. Out of this population, the economically inactive female population accounts for 75%, and the economically active population accounts only 36%. Further, female entrepreneurs in Sri Lanka is just 1% of the population, as stated by the Census and Statistics report in 2013. These statistics clearly indicate that female entrepreneurs are already underrepresented and underutilized. Many of them fail at the initial stages or later due to a reason other than socio-economic factors. You can imagine that women entrepreneurs have further been hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, social distancing measures, lockdown, distorted supply chain. Markets have worsened structural inequities and challenges that typically impede the performance and growth of women-owned businesses, and resulted in many temporarily or permanently closing down operations. Therefore, ensuring their access to critical support services will be important for ensuring their stabilization and recovery in post-COVID-19 context. At the same time, it is worth mentioning that the pandemic and lockdown in the country has created a new wave of opportunities for women in the informal sector. Women have contributed to various demands in food catering, homemade products, leather and handicrafts, and market these products successfully and creating a demand via e-commerce. These initiatives made by women was helpful in sustaining their livelihood and earning a reasonable income during lockdown. With the objectives of addressing the specific vulnerabilities in women, the Confederation of Micro, Small and Medium Industries, COSME, an organization comprising of past presidents of chambers of commerce, have linked with district and regional chambers to revive MSMEs in the country. We have launched a post-pandemic MSME revival program called Back to Business. Its underlying philosophy is to build back better. This includes taking immediate action to ensure business continuity as well as the assistance to reactivate business activity and building long-term resilience. This also means that the beneficiary MSME and livelihood will improve their way of doing business so that the business will be more resilient, technology and oriented, and better skilled and knowledgeable. This will augur well with the new business and social environment that will prevail in the post-COVID-19 era, where there is a new world with a new way of doing business. The program aims to provide in support for women entrepreneurs to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and adopt more sustainable, resilient business model. The project is targeting at least 5,000 women-owned small businesses in the manufacturing services and retail sector in urban areas which are represented by the network of district chambers of commerce and industry, which all have seen a severe decline in economic output. Working with partners, the project delivers an intervention to improve women entrepreneurs' access to training provisions, financial services, and market information. Digitalization is a cross-cutting component. The Back to Business project aims for small women-owned business to stabilize and recover from COVID-19 and adopt more sustainable and resilient business models. The project also aims to contribute to an inclusive, enabled environment for enterprises in targeted areas through public-private partnership. Over time, this will support the economic recovery of target enterprises from COVID-19, and it is generation of decent employment opportunities. I have to come out with some sort of thing that we completely did. We have immediately during the lockdown period, there were some private institution came back to support lockdown, people who are locked down. Most of the people they lost their jobs and they were all laid off. Women played a very, very positive role in getting into local business to revive and restructure, so that their skill was utilized to keep the family going. As you know, we had a permanent lockdown for months and months. Now this institution called the FemPower, we have signed an MOU with them. They have more than 5,000 women entrepreneurs registered with them. And there is another equal quantity in the informal sector. So this is a great success for us to bring back people back to business. In conclusion, I wish to leave the thoughts with you as the MBA students who will be taking charge of the top positions in both public and the private sector, that it is important to have an integrated approach with multiplier effect in business revival strategies, be it firm level or sector level. Having a comprehensive strategy in place is key to success of any management intervention. They say success is 20% skills and 80% strategy. With that thought, I wish to conclude my address, wishing you all success in your academic endeavor, and thanking once again the academic staff for the opportunities given to me this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nawaz, and appreciate all the comments. We'll have just a quick chat on this. I'm getting hosts of questions from the students. One thought that is coming through, Nawaz, is that, successive governments come and talk about SME development. and they say we are going to allocate 5 billion for SME development. We are going to allocate another 10 billion for assistance on new product development. But then end of the day, all these monies have to be channeled by the bank. But then when it has to be channeled by the bank asks for different kinds of documentations. They ask for P&L. When these small SMEs, a card manufacturer out of Plantain Leaves, who has about 5 fellows in the house and doing a fantastic job. I remember a guy like that coming when I was at the EDB, and I sent him to a fair, and then subsequently he, that was in 2004 and 2010, when I was sitting on the EDB board. That same fellow is now doing almost 20 to 23 million business. Now, he doesn't have P&Ls, So now, how can a person like this go to a bank and have access to these funds that the government has allocated? You know what I'm saying now? So how do you handle this?
Dr. Randa, I fully agree with you. We also face the same problem because the large amount of money has been allocated to revive and restructure the micro and small sector. As you know, micro and small sector are the backbone of the country economy, over 90%. And most of the industries, micro and small sector in the 25 districts, either they are sick or they are closed down because they don't have access to the funds. These state banks are allocated through the treasury to distribute these funds. The public sector alone cannot do this. It has to be a private-public partnership. We have made representation to the government. We have made representation to the public sector. We have to see how best we could distribute this fund. Of course, government has made very clear if you have, even the micro sector has certain amount of funds that are taken from the bank, or even they're in the grip for 50,000 or 100,000 rupees, to overlook that, to give them. But how will they identify this? Public sector alone can't do this. They must have the private sector. That is why we have requested to work with the regional and district chambers. They know, because we put an exercise to have a database in the country for the micro and small sector. I'm in this sector as you are also. We don't have a database of industries unless the Minister of Information gives. And we don't have any industrial policy in the country. Now only they're going to make the industrial policy. So the private sector can play an important role, not the public sector. Private sector can play an important role.
You're a legend when it comes to federations and the development of SME sector. Your experience is like out of this. I've seen this when I was chairman of the Export Development Board, when I was chairman of tourism. You have access to all the leisure sector SMEs as well as Export Development Board or export SMEs. Everybody has come on board. Everybody talks about it, every single budget. How come even after an economy which was 30 billion in 2009 and today we are now a 90 billion economy, 3 times that size, how come we don't have industrial policy now?
Well, I myself can't. I remember 2 years back, we requested our regional director from United Nations Industrial Development. And I know UNIDO is not a funding agency. They give you technical support. We got a host of people coming into this country. We work together with the official of the Minister of Industries and have 2 meetings. There were no follow-up. Now, when sector coming from Vienna to support us and to give the industrial policy, They didn't. But now they are teamed up to do the industrial policy. I'm telling you, public sector alone can't do this. You have to have the private sector on board. Otherwise, you can't. Same thing happens to the micro and small sector. Because when you see the 25 districts, you are well aware when we started the industrial estate in the northern part, we had so much of land to give because there are no proper order. Lands were allocated. Some of them took the land, but the government must play a role. Now, as COSME, we are now playing a different role, identifying the micro and small sector, small businesses, new technology, new machinery at a lower end. Now, we are now looking at the government sector. The government is also very busy. The sectors are very busy. But the public sector is also so busy. Unless the public sector come forward, we will not be able to resurrect or revive the industry, which is more than 60% of the small sector as either sick or closed down. I think you made a point there, and this is why the COSME is formed. And
so,
I have
so how does, since you're the country head for UNIDO and you go for global forums, how do you sometimes defend Sri Lanka when the basic infrastructure like the policy framework is not in place? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I know. How do you do this?
The industrial policy, because there is industries have been fragmented into three sections, like the batik and handloom industry. You have the ITI sector, you have the Minister of Industries, we have handicraft industry. Those are all industries. So what we do, we develop certain sectors. Now, see, as you know, we have our country program is coming now. We have already we have already assured an $18 million support for the country program. We will sign the country program because very unfortunate because of this COVID, it got delayed. By end of this month, we will sign the country program, and we will identify a certain sector like the handicraft, cleaner production, greening of the industrial estate, environment. So these things are funded by different donor countries. So industrial policy has to be done by the ministries and the public sector. We go in to see how best we could support the industry. The policy must be taken by the government, not by the donor countries.
Now, moving the discussion to another area. You have served successive governments and sat on many boards. And every time when a government comes, we always believe that, there's a new way of working, and we believe there's a lot of optimism. We also had that same thing with the current government at play. Now, what is your view of on how we should do this, at least in the future, given that, let's keep the past behind? What is your view?
I think we have to, there are leading businessmen in the country. Most of the some of those business people are retired. You have to get their support to come on board. Now we have decided, we have also told the public sector, every board should have a business person. We can't bring in people who are retired over 70 years onto the board. You can't do it. You know that very much. So we need the people like entrepreneurs. We need the people who has enough experience in this type of business. So, for example, when you have the industrial sector, we need somebody who has gone through the industries over 30 years, 40 years. They will be good advisors. We can't bring people from complete outside and they don't know anything about industry. They don't know anything about. So simple as that. So now if you have somebody who retired in some sector, in environment sector, if you bring him to do something in an industry or value addition for tea, they won't do it because they won't know it. But these are appointments that has to, they have to streamline this appointment. So I think every public board should have at least 40 to 50% private sector infusement. Otherwise, they can't make the, only the public sector alone can't do it, because public sector are not aware, they don't have any knowledge for the sake of getting onto the board. You should know better. And that's all we have. Because now, for example, some of those sectors, some of those boards that you had, or Mr. Kodagada had, it was a big board where 7 or 8 secretaries are on the board. Fine, but these are the sectors we have to work with. And I still feel the government should take, government should play a major role in appointing the right people to the right job.
Now, I mean, it's strange that you say this, and you're a person of high esteem with so much of experience. But then, I mean, what is happening in tourism? Because currently the tourism is saying that we don't want the private sector participation, and they are saying that the papers are all reporting that the act is going to be shelved, which was so thought through and developed. And I remember I was at that time the head of the National Council for Economic Development, and we took a lot of pain to develop that proposal. It was approved by Parliament and Cabinet. It was, both passed it, and then the NCED was very, very hyped up to have this private sector arrangement of driving tourism. But now we are going back to a total public sector driven strategy, and all the papers are reporting how the private sector doesn't agree. So how do you handle this? Because that sector alone, 80% of the leisure sector is private sector SMEs, and 99% is private sector. Am I right, Nawaz?
Yes. No, I think, the recent thing that has happened in the tourism sector, I think over 95% of the private sector is totally against this. And the public sector should give a thought for this, and they have to amend. Without the without the private sector, tourism cannot go forward. I'm telling you now, because we have also made representation. I think they must be very careful. You can't disown. See the amount of money invested by the private sector in the tourism industry. You are heading one of those sectors in the tourism industry. You should know better. And even there was lots of people in the tourism industry is not happy because they are asking to change. So we have to make a representation. Not that we can't go on the road and have picketing, but I think we should speak to the head of state, or we have to have a special meeting through some organization, and then inform them this have to work. I'm sure if we can meet the right people and make up a proposal that this should not work, and we had to make some amendment, it can work. But I don't think we can fight with them. So we go with them and see how best we could revive.
I was going back. Let me take you to a new area of discussion. How bad did the COVID attack the performance of SMEs? I mean, can you give us a update?
I will give you the MSME sector. Right. So now all the sectors that now see, we have according to information, Department of Information, we have got about 1.3 million micro and small sector registered in the form of in the Pradeshiya Sabha or in the incorporated. There are 800,000 informal, out of which more than 50% are women entrepreneurs, which they don't want to go. So all these sectors, they are laid off because of this COVID-19. People can't go to work because it's lockdown. They are closed their industrial factories. And COVID, now we did a very good job. We locked down very much early, but I think now it has spread because we, due to various, like for example, we had last year we never had any celebration. This year we have no choice but to open up. The more you open up, the more problem we'll face. But if you don't control I think most of the industries will have a huge crisis. With COVID, because we test 1,000 people today, say 60% will be, we are only testing 1,000 people. If you test 10,000 people, there'll be 6,000 people in COVID. So we don't have a testing thing. And I'm sure the government should give priority to this, because if this continues to go, we will be like any other country, because Sri Lanka is a small place. Now see, the COVID was in Colombo to some extent. Now it has gone wide. It has gone to north and east. Unbelievable. There were only 1, 2. Now there is 80, 60, 80, 90. Because these people come to Colombo with their produce, stay over here, and when they go back, they take the COVID back. And this is so unless they have strict medical control, we will not be able to stop this. This will go.
Because, I mean, yeah, very interesting, the points that you mentioned, Nawaz. But I mean, when a country has a 2/3 majority and you have a skilled person heading the state, how come, you have behavior skewness, like when we had the second wave attacking Sri Lanka? And now we again see the same thing being repeated at the New Year celebrations. And now we are vulnerable for another third wave hitting us in the weeks to come.
New strains.
Yeah. Now, how do you come to terms? Because end of the day, you and I are private sector people. We are apolitical in nature. I mean, to a youngster who is doing an MBA, what do we tell when they ask this question?
Actually, it's very difficult. I think the public also should take some interest. Just because there is open doesn't mean that you allow them to go all over. They should take more interest, because if they go out, they are also bringing that same pandemic into the house, and then they do multiply. Now, mostly in Colombo and in outskirts of Colombo, this COVID multiplied only in pocket areas. Now, for example, certain areas, in one row, there are 30 houses, 40 houses. And if one row of flats, 150 flats, they all live. When you lock down, because these people they're not working as government or business people, they are all day-to-day workers. So the government has to play a very positive role in supporting them. Of course, government has stopped some of their basic necessity of imports. So these money should be utilized. I'm sure we can control this if the private sector also cooperate.
So, now what makes you tick? I mean, you see so much of policy inconsistencies in the government. You see so much of issues of where private sector sometimes connives with the government for their own personal gain. I mean, you as a human being, what makes you tick to continue to serve? I mean, year on year, you're working in the public sector, wanting to contribute and see what changes that you're going to make. What makes you tick, Nawaz? I mean, you don't have to do this.
No, because, we have a certain responsibility. Because, it's a corporate social responsibility. All my project that I have started are all past presidents of chambers of commerce and industry. We have formed it with our own money. We were not given government cars and petrol. We spent our own money to have this project, to see how best we could support the private sector, not the public sector, the private sector individual who are now suffering because we have project. I have done so many projects. We will also see how best we could do we will organize some grants for them. We have an advisory panel. We have an advisory panel to them free of charge. They will say, they will take you a business, and if they want any support, we are now we are also now discussing with the donor agencies now how best we could revive not the large, medium or large. We are only interested in micro and small sector. We help the micro to become small, and thereafter they have to do. But I think we cannot depend all the time on any government that comes to power, because they have the other issues. They are mostly involved in development projects. They are interested in all high-rise projects. But nobody goes into the micro and small sector. This is the backbone of the country's economy. I think nobody has identified this. That is why we, private sector, identified it to support whatever way we can support them. We need new technology. I'm talking to two neighboring countries to support us. We need new technology. We don't need big machinery. We need new technology, small machines. This is a good time. The bank, earlier we paid as much as 18 to 20% interest. We are paying 4 to 6% interest. We have to support them. But the idea is to the sector also, when they get a large sum loan, they don't know how to manage the loan, how to repay the loan. Because the administrative cost is more than the profit that they generate from the industry. So this has to be given a thought and advise them. Like in India, they start a project in a small room. If you start a project in this country, they will ask for a high-rise building first. By the time you start manufacturing, your admin cost is so high, your repayment is so high, you don't make any profit. So we have to change the structure. That is why we are now working with all the regional and district chambers, especially the women entrepreneurs, and they play a very active role. And we are now in 2 donor countries. We are talking to 2 donor countries to support them. We are trying to see whether we could give a grant to them, a certain percentage, and give them a support to revive them. The most important thing is marketing. I know now, if you see this tremendous, this post-COVID development, some of the product these women entrepreneurs are putting up, unbelievable. Their packaging is superb. Recently we had a seminar on the EDB and ITI also, and their product is good. They also have a responsibility when they manufacture, especially food industries. So I think we need sustainability. We need standard institution must come to us. So I'm sure we'll be able to do this. It's an opportunity for us, for small, micro and small sector, small manufacturers. Now we are working on them to see if they are competitive locally, they can also export and they can go globally. And I'm sure we have to start somewhere and take COVID as an opportunity for all these people and see how best we could do. We did the same process in 2005, and we took tsunami was an opportunity, and we did well. And we resurrected more than 11,600 micro and small sector in the country. And we got the first World Award Prize for this.
What do you think are the key ingredients for success that you can advocate to the youngsters who are doing the MBA?
They have to focus. They must have even if you are sitting for an exam or you are sitting for an MBA, they must have a vision what they're going to do. And I'm sure if they come up to that level, they have already decided what they should do. And we cannot depend on any private sector or the government to do it. I'm sure there are enough public sector, enough private sector is there. One thing that I am planning is for subcontracting partnership, which is very important, and it is very successful in Europe. It is very successful in India, but we don't have a subcontracting partnership here. They produce from the pin. One institution produce pin from the carburetor. No, you can't do that. Every part has to be manufactured by different. That is why we ask them. Now, subcontracting partnership, for example, we have enough rubber. What is one of our main exports? We can have a rubber-based industry in the country, and we can export. See the number of car manufacturers in the neighboring country. We can sign an agreement with them. So this is why I'm telling you the right people should go into the right sector. I'm sure if you put somebody who doesn't know business, and if you ask them to do export, he won't do it, because he will only talk and come back, and he will have a nice trip and come back, nothing will happen. You and I go, we see how best we could develop this sector or industry, and see how best to get the best results that we can. I'm sure you have done so much during your period, and how many people are now in existence. You know, you have done marketing. You are a maestro in the marketing. Marketing is also one of the main important things. Industries alone can't thrive. You need marketing, packaging, and these are, every sector must come forward to support that. But I'm sure my advice to the students, they have to focus on some particular project, and those days are gone where you have to borrow your money and do it. I'm sure there are so many private sector coming in this sector to support them financially. And we are also now planning to see how best we could develop Northeast and North Central province. There are great opportunities there, I see, in small sector. I will name a few in different line of things. So we are now working on it. We are working with 2-3 countries to support us. And if everything goes well, not that I'm going to do, I will identify some investor, and if they need any private investment, we can arrange through our institution where a private sector will invest, and not that he's going to sit there, he will see how best we could reap the profit on that.
That was, thank you very much. I think it's great talking to you, and I just thought maybe what advice would you give young Nawaz at 19 years? If someone were to look at you and say, what is the advice you'll give Nawaz when he was 19 years? What would be that advice?
You have to focus yourself. You should know what you're doing. Now, see, that particular age I took, you have to, first thing you have to do, you have to like the job that you do. It's hard work. And you have to focus yourself. And you should know what you're doing. Most of the youngsters, and they have other interests now. During our time, Doctor, we never had all these digital. We don't have any phone. We went to office with a hand, a small typewriter in the hand, and we type our letters in the pre-printed airmail letterhead, and we send it by mail. If you send one mail to organization and 3 of them reply, that was it for us. We have broken the ice. But here, everything is available. With all this, if they can't do it, impossible. I'm sure if you see, the youngsters can do better than what we have done, because they have an access to the whole world. So I think we should take, it's a dream. There are youngsters who, I know a youngster who was doing nothing. He was picking, very interesting story. He was picking bottles from the eastern province, plastic bottles. So I was wondering why he picking plastic. He has employed few people, plastic bottles. And what did he do? He crushed it. He found a market to sell it, because he doesn't want to invest on the machinery. He started doing that. Now he has started, after 3-4 years, he has started to pelletize those things. Another example I'll give you. There was a person in the eastern province. I was interested in supporting them through their Indian organization. There was a huge plantation of mangoes there. Today, if you have 100 acres or 50 acres of mango tree, what do they do with the small mangoes that are fallen? They bury it, they collect it and throw it. An Indian organization came, got these women, young women entrepreneurs who are in the neighborhood, collected this, they converted that into a pickle and they are selling it. And now they have an income of about 30 to 40,000 rupees a month, which is more than enough to live for them. So they will improve. It's a dream. And without a vision, you cannot go. And you can't try your luck. Today I will do industry. Tomorrow I forget industry and I'll do something else. Now, for example, a person who's in the IT sector, he will go on the IT sector. He can't leave that sector and come back and do some development of some industry. He had to go on the IT sector. He will go from strength to strength. My advice to them, you must have a dream what you want to do. You have to have a vision. You go ahead with it. You will be not successful first year. You will be not successful second year. I'm sure if you continue more than 2 to 3 years, you know the pros and cons of the industry and you will do better. That's my advice.
Thank you very much, Nawaz. Can I hand over to Kaushali for any online questions?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Nawaz. Indeed, it was brilliant and lovely to have listened to you. We do have one question, but it was aligned with what Dr. Rohantha asked about what is the advice for the young us who are doing MBA. So I think it was already addressed. That was a cover as to, overall question from so many questions that came in, especially towards that area. And so that brings us to an end of a discussion, which is very important and very interesting. And thank you so much for that industrial input that is provided, and of course the personal development input that is provided. And I'm sure our students will benefit a lot out of this discussion today. So while thanking you and while thanking the audience, we are at the end of another session that is taking place, and we would like to definitely see you in another week's time. And until then, good night from all of us.
But thank you very much. But you can always circulate our email, Confederation on Micro Small Industries. If they want any assistance, any support, any information, if they want, we will give you all the information they want in any sector, industrial sector or any sector they want, free of charge. For them, that will be an encouragement for them. And we will have one-to-one meeting with them to see how best we could support them. We are always there to support.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nawaz.
And we'll hope to see you back again in campus soon.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.